Hi everyone, in today's video I'm going to be talking about two seers or visionaries who were able to predict future events with great accuracy and who gained quite a bit of popularity within their own lifetime as a result of their visionary gifts. The first visionary I'm going to be talking to you today about is Hildegard of Bingen. Hildegard was a German nun who lived in the 12th century during the Middle Ages, the era that spans from about the 5th to 15th century. During those times, male church officials controlled society entirely, and wise women no longer commanded the respect of their communities. Females were believed to be more passive and less intelligent than their male counterparts, and any women who displayed any kind of psychic gifts suffered death and persecution because they were believed to be witches under Satan's spell. Hildegard was born in 1098 to a noble German family, and she was the youngest of 10 children. Hildegard began having these visions when she was just 3 years old, and very early on she realized she was able to know things before they actually happened. Hildegard's family was close to another family who had a young daughter named Jutta, who became Hildegard's mentor very early on. When the teenage Jutta made the decision to enter into religious life, Hildegard's parents decided to dedicate her to the Catholic Church and delivered her to a convent when she was just 8 years old. Hildegard grew up in a small room with just one window, and she spent her time in prayer, silence, studying, embroidering, and fasting. In her teens, she became a nun under the Benedictine order, who followed the rules of Saint Benedict, who stressed a life of work and study rather than a life of prayer alone. At the age of 38, she was elected the head of her convent with 100 people under her care, and later moved to Bingen on the banks of the Rhine River. During the 12th century in Europe, there was a revival of the eremitic lifestyle. People cherished the ascetic ideals that dated back to the desert fathers and mothers of the early Christian era. Men and women alike were giving up a life of marriage, luxury, and wealth to live a solitary life as free-roaming hermits. Jutta took on this ascetic lifestyle and devoted herself to prayer, fasting, vigils, and nakedness. She recited the entire Psalter at least once a day, and she even tortured her own body. She taught Hildegard many things, and she was her mentor, but because she took this harsh ascetic lifestyle, she died at the age of 44. While Hildegard was of poor and fragile health her whole life, she praised the Benedictine virtue of moderation, and she lived to be 81. Hildegard was able to accomplish a lot throughout her lifetime. She was the only woman of her age to be accepted as an authoritative voice on Christian doctrine. She was the only woman who had permission to write theological books. She was the only woman who had permission from the Pope to preach before a mixed audience of men and women. She was the only composer of her era known by name and by a large corpus of surviving music. She was the only saint whose official biography includes a first-person memoir. In her spare time, she invented her own language that was likely spoken among the nuns. She was also an expert herbalist and environmentalist, and she gave advice to at least 4 popes, 2 emperors, 1 king, and several saints, and she fought to shed light on the corruption of the church's patriarchal hierarchy. But Hildegard was able to do that what was impossible for other women to do because of her visions. Being able to preach in front of other men, and the Pope and other high elite men asking for her advice, shows that they genuinely believed that she was inspired by God and that she was having prophetic visions. They believed she was a prophetic figure who had insight into the future. She began having these visions at the age of 3, but at the time she didn't know they were some strange occurrences and she couldn't communicate them well due to her age. But a source recounts of how the young Hildegard was able to accurately predict what a baby calf would look like down to its markings and its color just by looking at a pregnant cow. At first she was confused and embarrassed, and she kept the visions to herself. But in her 40s, when she fell really ill, she heard a voice commanding her to write the visions down and to share them with the world. After consulting with the Pope, she published her first collections of her visions. In these visions, she would see ways to treat medical conditions, she would see solutions to scientific and theological problems, and she saw an ideal future where women were honored. When she was having these visions, her eyes remained open and she was fully conscious. She would paint what she saw, and she painted herself as a tiny seated figure gazing up at angels, demons, and humanoid-like figures with 3 wings and fiery red faces. She also saw the universe as a cosmic egg, and God, humans, and nature being all connected. The reason why Hildegard's visions are so interesting and so unique is that she was fully awake when she was having them. She wasn't in a state of trance, ecstasy, or in a dreamlike state, but she was fully conscious. This is very unique because while we have many accounts of prophets and visionaries having these experiences in a dreamlike state, there are not many accounts of individuals having them when they're fully awake. This means that her state of being fully awake and lucid is virtually unique. During the psychedelic era, her visions were compared to hallucinations, and since the 12th century, people have pointed out that her visions are consistent with severe migraine attacks. Charles Singer, a historian of science, has pointed out that migraines can produce disturbances of the visual field, much like what Hildegard was experiencing when she was seeing shimmering lights, stars, and terrifying-looking figures. In addition to that, her symptoms of temporary blindness and paralyzing heaviness are also consistent with severe migraine attacks. But whether or not Hildegard was having severe migraines, that condition alone does not explain her rich prophetic vocation. Thank you so much for watching the first part of this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to see the second part on Nostradamus, please check out the link in the description below. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.